We are now in the process of trying to establish a quorum, so we're kind of doing informal survey. But I would like to just start around the table and do introductions, and just briefly give us an introduction and what group you're representing. And I am Darrell Glenn from El Paso County. I'll start it off.
Turner Smith, representing the PPACG.
Norm Steen, representing Teller County.
Brandon Gould, representing Senator Corey Gardner.
Rod Chisholm, representing Fort Carson.
Colonel Ken Olson, representing the Air Force Academy.
And Stephen Slade, representing Schriever Air Force Base.
Eric Dormy, representing Peterson.
Phil Thomas, Mayor Pro Tem, City of Fountain.
Greg Dorman, representing the state of Colorado.
And Justin Town Lee Colburn, representing the Congressman.
And I'm Serena Eitler with the Office of Economic Adjustment in the Department of Defense.
Rob McDonald with Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments.
Tim Payne, Fremont County.
Okay, great. Thank you guys very much. Have you had a chance to take a look at the agenda? Do we need to make any corrections or modifications?
Move to approve. Second.
Do we have enough to be able to? All right, great. We have a quorum, so I will. There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thank you very much. Item number 3, public comments. Topics that are not currently on the agenda. Do we have anybody in the audience or anybody that wants to bring up a subject that is not currently on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move to the minutes. Have you had an opportunity to look at the minutes? Do we need to make any changes there? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our report section, manager's report.
Good afternoon, Angela Essing. So I have a few items to update you on quickly. I'm going to start with the survey. We still have a continuing survey going on for the initial public participation process. And I'm going to give you a couple updates for that. It will not end until the end of the month, but we are excited to report, as of this morning, we had 591 respondents, which is really very impressive. And as you look through the respondents thus far, it's very representative of the community, very representative of all 4 counties. And we'll go through and do a considerable amount of analysis before your next meeting and report to you on all of the items that we surveyed. But today I have 2 items to share with you, just to kind of give you an idea of how the survey is going at this point. So out of the 591 surveyed, we asked what was their satisfaction level with the military as a community partner. And as of this morning, 70% of the people said they were either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. And then 16% said they were somewhat unsatisfied or very unsatisfied. And then the remainder were in a neutral column. So again, getting incredible response that way. Then another question we asked is, when I moved into my home, and then we asked them to choose all that apply. So we've had 70% of the respondents choose, I knew a military installation was a neighbor and understood there would be land use impacts, which is very interesting because it does correlate with the 70% who are satisfied and somewhat satisfied. And again, once we analyze this data, we'll be able to see if there's a direct correlation there. Then we had another 6% say, I had no idea a military installation was a neighbor. We had 24% say, I knew a military installation was a neighbor, but did not understand the impacts. And then we had 5% say, I was made aware of the impacts by my realtor. And 4% say they were made aware of the impacts through their closing documents. So again, very good information for us to dive into and process. The other thing I want to share with you, we mapped this by zip code, and this is a little bit dated. So when we mapped this, we had about 120 survey respondents. Now we're up to 600, almost 600. But again, the survey has not necessarily skewed one way or the other, but we will have more information on this as we at the next meeting as we analyze a lot of this. So this is for, and I'll go into this a little bit later in the agenda about the telephone town halls, but this graphic here represents people who answered this question in the telephone town hall and people, the first 120 people who had answered this question in the survey. And then we were able to, one of the questions in the survey asked for the cross streets. And so from there we could pull the location of the comment, and then that's what we've mapped here. So you can see, obviously, the dark green, if they are completely solid, it doesn't necessarily mean there was one respondent. It just means everybody who responded had the same answer. So it gives, I think, a good representation of all four of the counties, and again, we'll keep updating this for you. This one was the question of whether or not they knew a military installation was within their community, and if they did know, how they knew it was in the community. So on this case, too, we did use heat map colors, but the orange and red do not necessarily signify bad. They just signify that they learned that the installation was a neighbor from a realtor and or their closing documents. And really what we saw is majority of that is around the Air Force Academy, where they did have that information in addition to either just knowing the installations were there. All right. Then here. The other update I have, which again is on the agenda, but I want to take a chance to introduce them also. Today we have with us HVNA, Bachman, and Tetra Tech, and they are on the agenda later, so I'll let them tell you about their team and what they are bringing to the table. But they were awarded the RFP for the communication, and it's been incredible working with them to this point. They've really helped us take those surveys up into that 600 level, and we're hoping to go even higher than that here very soon. So we're glad to have them here, and again, they'll come up to the podium a little bit later. I also wanted to report that we have stood up the U.S. Air Force Academy Flight Working Group. The working groups are on your agenda today, and we will go into those in more detail at that point in time. But I did want to report, as far as mine, that we have had 2 meetings, and there was a handout for the roster as you came in, so if you didn't pick that up, you can pick it up on your way out. And it gives a nice sampling of the actual individuals that have agreed to participate in that working group. And we can talk about that in more detail, too, once we get to the working group committees. Serena Eitler is with us today from the OEA, and she has been spending the last day and a half with us, helping us get ready to look at amending the current grant that we have with the addition of Schriever, and with a few scope changes. We're looking at moving forward with that. So that's kind of been a task of ours the last couple days. And then lastly, for my report, I'm definitely sad to report this because an incredible group to work with and a great opportunity for myself to be with all of you. But this is my last meeting. You're in incredible hands with Brian and Potts, and then the team, Tom Miller, and of course Rob. And everyone will keep this project running, probably even better than when I was here. So you're in very good hands, and I will miss all of you. But it's been wonderful to work with you to this point. Again, my husband's in the military, and I have a chance to actually travel with him on this next assignment, and I couldn't pass it up.
Yeah,
so.
You see the tears.
I never noticed.
Okay, was that it? Okay. Item B, the technical committee reports.
I'm Brian Potts. I'm a planner with PPACG, and I've been charged with kind of guiding the technical committee. We've met twice since the last policy committee in February, and actually Greg Dorman was selected as chair by the committee, so it's good to have that kind of overlap with both of the meetings, so it helps with coordination. The key things are, of course, as Angela mentioned, that there was recommendations to this board for working groups, and so that was the key task that they've been working on. Our next meeting is going to be next week, and at that point we're going to start to look at some of the more technical aspects of how this study is going to be, the document might be structured in order to help make sure that it's going to be effective and usable for the end users, since it is going to be a lot of development professionals, the installations, and we want to make sure that we're getting a lot of feedback up front to make sure that we start writing this document and this study and head in the right direction before we get too far down the line. And so hopefully with the addition of the working groups, they will also be vetting some of the strategies that come out of the working groups and can then recommend those to you. And so hopefully by your next meeting in August, the technical committee will have met just prior to that and may have some strategies, initial strategies for this committee to consider. And that's all I have for today.
Okay, great, thank you. Item 6, action items, ratification of the JLUS working groups.
So as Brian mentioned, there was a considerable amount of discussion in the technical committee meeting, and the items that you have before you, which again starts with agenda item 6A, which is in the upper right-hand corner if you're searching for the page. I'm sorry, they're not numbered consecutively. We did put on there the U.S. Air Force Academy Flight Training Working Group. We didn't have an official motion to move forward with them. But I do feel like in the last meeting we mentioned it and said that time is of the essence because of the flights that happened during the summer, and so we have started to move forward with that. It doesn't mean that we cannot make additions to the group if we need to. And then you can see there's the technical committee, and maybe Mr. Dorman, if you wanted to expand on this too. The technical committee felt it was very important to have a regional airspace working group.
I'm happy to expand.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So certainly we felt that the priority and the 5-meter target, if you will, was the U.S. Air Force Academy Flight Working Group, and that because there's specific community concerns, it was wise to move forward with addressing those issues. However, we felt that that could easily get bogged down if we tried to tackle other issues, and there are other regional airspace issues across the counties and installations that are part of this study. And so we'd hope to have a working group to create a larger conversation around impacts both to civil and military airspace, and ensure that users, and it's not mentioned in this document, and I would move to add it, but that such as the National Guard and other users that, while they don't have an installation, frequently fly through this area, are also incorporated into that conversation. So it's a more holistic look. So that was our intent with that, and we feel it has been and will continue to be an important issue. And we just wanted to propose that to the policy committee as a separate item.
Great. And welcome.
Thank you. I just have a question on the Regional Airspace Working Group. It says all airports in the study area, but given the impacts that DIA and Centennial both have on airspace down here, should they be included in that working group or just consulted?
If I may respond to that, we felt that by including Denver Center and FAA that we would incorporate those concerns without having to bring in the specific, airport administrations. So, again, I'm open to discussion on that. I would love to have thoughts of this committee, but I think that we can. I think the flow through routes and stuff are more impactful than what's maybe happening on the ground at DIA in this community.
Yeah. Great. Next one.
Yep. So then we also we're recommending the Southern Stormwater Working Group. However, this one will evolve in time. There are several groups within the community, if not even kind of one coalition of groups working on a lot of the stormwater, and obviously with everything that's happened now with the southern delivery system, this may be somewhat in existence. And so similar to the Monument Creek watershed stormwater up north, we may find that this group is in place and just want to vet and make sure that the installations, if they are impacted by that, have a representation within that larger group.
And also to kind of tack on to that, we're with a lot of things that have occurred more recently and how this issue has been rapidly moving forward between discussions with Colorado Springs and Pueblo and so on, that we may feel it's just a matter of figuring out how a lot of the projects that may be coming up in the next couple of years, how the military and the communities work together on anything that may be within the military's realm of influence or surrounding. And so that's kind of where we might see this working group really factoring in as things continue to evolve. So that's what we're thinking about.
So is this a separate and distinct, I'm sorry, Colonel Olson, a separate and distinct working group, or is it one writ large stormwater group looking at the Monument Creek watershed all the way down through Pueblo? Or are we talking two separate issues?
In this case, because the Upper Monument Creek group is focused more towards the north end, we realize that at this point we're not sure if there is a group that's working on or coordinating down in the southern region that may be more in the realm of the Fort Carson or Peterson area. And so that's where we thought we should at least get something created so there's more communication on any projects that may be coming up in the southern region.
Okay, thank you.
Coordinating with the Fountain Creek watershed? Okay.
And that's with the Fountain Creek watershed project and that group. They're the group who's kind of tying all of these together, because obviously they're looking at Monument Creek and how it flows then into the southern area of the city. And that's where, again, we feel that it's being handled, but we'll still keep doing research to make sure that's the case. And then we can report back to you with which particular organizations are handling it, how they're handling it, and then decide how we want to move forward.
I'm on the Arkansas River Roundtable, and they've been working on this for some time. Terry Hart, the Pueblo County Commissioner, is also on that, so he might be an asset to talk to.
Okay. Go ahead, continue.
Okay, that takes us to the Transportation Working Group, and I will maybe turn this over to Brian, if that's...
I'm sorry, for transportation?
Yeah.
Yes. On the Transportation Working Group, the way we kind of see this evolving is that there's various different types of transportation issues that a lot of them, in some cases, relate to traffic and commuter times and may be related directly to the operations or the way employees and personnel are flowing in and out of the installations. And so there's transportation networks surrounding that'll need to be looked at. So in some cases, what we may do is sort of phase the transportation work group's focus to where perhaps it just goes installation by installation because there may be a different set of communities or a different set of issues that are immediately geographically surrounding each one. And also look at things outside of roadways, including perhaps freight, rail, and so forth. And there'd be room for that within this group. So obviously, in terms of transportation, this wouldn't be a duplication with airspace. That would have its own thing, but this would be more related to ground transportation. So some of these representatives here may be transitioning in and out depending on what phase we're working on, that working group would be working on. So, thank you.
May I?
Oh, go ahead.
On the core values on that working group, you have transportation of people and cargo between Peterson and Schriever, but transportation of people and cargo from Fort Carson to Peterson is also important.
Yep. We'll make that correction there.
Good catch.
Brian?
Yes.
I got a question. The core values indicates, Normstein, Teller County, sorry. Core values, safe and efficient transportation between Peterson and Schriever. Carson, Pinion Canyon, lots of other routes, so why the narrower scope?
I think that there may have been a couple of different, I'm not sure why Fort Carson isn't on there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, when we did our, we have our challenges, our compatibility challenges matrix. One of the first items, obviously, that was identified was getting the employees between Peterson and Schriever, and also just getting employees to Schriever in a safe manner. So a lot of the focus was specifically on Highway 94, and I think that's kind of where that core value came from. Absolutely doesn't mean we can't expand it. We have heard also from Fort Carson. We just recently met with them, and we did hear, too, obviously, that rail is an incredibly important item to look at, too, with Fort Carson. So with what Mr. Merritt just said, too, that makes sense to add such a goal. So we weren't specifically trying to be singular in that sense, and we are looking, obviously, to this group to make sure that it covers the scope.
Okay. Well, so we're going to talk about whether or not that core value should change to something broader. Okay.
I guess I hear you saying that
We should.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I don't know, maybe you have to have Fort Carson comment.
Yeah.
Well, actually, before all the JLUS had kicked in a number of years ago, Highway 115 was a similar situation as Highway 94, and we didn't have the JLUS study, but this team, along with a bunch of other partners, engaged on that, and we did make that a lot safer avenue and whatever, and that was our main area for safety. Now, I think it is a good idea just from the deployment aspect. It's not as much safety as it is a deployment readiness issue for our one way in, one way out for our rail, and most of our heavy equipment deploys that way. So I think as the discussion had evolved the last time that the technical committee and reps were talking, that may be inclusive into the values now, not from the safety aspect as much, but from the deployment importance. So it's a good thing to add to the values.
We have two new people that just came in, so just introduce yourself.
I apologize, we're late.
Oh, don't worry.
JLUS and hit the storm. And
That's okay.
thank you.
Scott Hobson with the City of Pueblo. And
Okay.
actually, we did have a preliminary council of governments meeting backed up to this, so we apologize.
Oh, hey, no problems. Just welcome.
Judy Letter from Pueblo West Metro.
Okay. So did we?
We're just going through the working groups, if you have that in your packet. if you wanna
Yeah,
look at
we are
that.
on the almost the last page of second to last page of item 6A. And we're on the public communication working group. And the one thing I do want to mention, too, with the comments that were just made, you also reminded me that the core values we've put in here were obviously recommendations. When the working groups get together, they will really work through those core values and then, I guess, make them meet what that group wants to accomplish based on who comes together. And to give you a quick example of that, too, the Air Force Academy Flight Working Group, the core values that are listed in there, I wanted to note, too, that, and I forgot as we went over this, but the first couple were changed to be added together, and so their current core values read like this. USAFA flight training is a core function and mission of the Air Force Academy and is executed safely. Secondly, to generate workable strategies that will best meet the needs of all community stakeholders. The third one is surrounding residents can maintain safety and quality of life. And then lastly, to improve information flows between all stakeholders regarding flights through U.S. Air Force Academy airspace. So we did wordsmith them once the working group got together to make sure that everybody on the working group could make a statement of belief with those core values. And what we can do is, as we stand up these working groups, we'll bring those core values back to you then as that group puts them together, and then allow you guys to tell us if they are on the right track, should be broader, should be more narrow. And so, again, you will oversee the direction of those working groups as a whole, and we'll continue to communicate that with you. Okay, so that takes us back to the Public Communication Working Group. And the recommendation here, we had quite a bit of discussion about this too, but the recommendation came from wanting to have communication between all of the entities as far as development review is considered. And this is everything from, say, alternative energy with the windmills to, oh, am I on the wrong one?
That's about information flows.
Right. Oh my gosh, totally sorry. Thank you, Brian. So Brian just noted I'm actually talking about the next one on the next page, the Land Use and Development Review Working Group. So let's still continue with that, and then we'll go back to the public communication one. Sorry.
That was just me.
The Land Use Review and Development Review Working Group. Obviously, the technical committee is made up of planning directors and the like, and so this was a big one for them to really focus on the communication for the development review items. And again, if it's alternative energy, things like windmills, maybe it's just an annexation. I shouldn't say just. Maybe it's an annexation for the city, the county, those type of items. And the group that is put together here is to really look at the information flow between those organizations and how we can improve upon that. Also looking at best practices that are in existence, but again, to improve upon those.
Okay.
Now, the Public Communications Working Group. Sorry, back to the second to last page. Again, we felt it was important to stand up a committee like this, too, as a working group, because there are a lot of opinions, and they're about how to get the word out about the joint land use study and about how to keep people involved in the joint land use study. And so this is looking at bringing together experts from each of the installations, from the major cities involved, obviously a representative from each of the counties, and then also looking at some outside groups like the Press Association and the Southern Colorado Press Association. So our consultants with Bachman have helped us with this, and then of course our own public communications department. So if you are in agreement with this, they will then move forward and set up such a committee to help us make sure we are getting the word out there as much as possible.
How do we talk about, for example, after this meeting, do we issue some sort of statement to let people know that this is an ongoing activity? Have we thought about that?
Yeah,
Since we meet so infrequently, I think it's good that the community is aware of what we're doing. So I didn't know if that was part of the plan, but when I think public communication, I think all the issues that are happening now, it would be helpful to just kind of keep people aware of the fact that we are working these issues.
And I think that's a great task for the committee here that we just discussed. And we are going to give you an update today about the entire public communication process. Rachel Beck, our policy and communications person for PPACG, can help kind of articulate that to you, how we are going to keep people in the loop. We do have a good plan. We have discussed it because it is incredibly important. These 500 or almost 600 people now that have filled out this survey, we absolutely want them involved the entire way through the process. And also all the public communications through the papers and things like that. We want this up and running for the 2 years of the project.
Turner Smith, Town of Raymond. Is there a chance that Rachel or someone could write a article for release in a small paper? That way, the wrong information is not released, or if you catch my drift.
Yeah, Rachel's coming up. I can tell you that she does do news releases, and I'll let her expand.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Rachel Beck, Policy and Communication Manager. That's a great question that you bring up, Mr. Smith. There's a double-edged sword when it comes to media relations. On the one hand, you get a huge reach if you can get newspapers and television media and broadcast media to give their audiences, which are considerable in size, of course, an update on your project. The downside is you don't get to control the actual content. They hold that very dear, and so the trade-off there is you get a large audience, but you lose a little bit of control of the message. We, of course, do our best to make sure that they have the facts and provide them with the information from our perspective, but we don't control the ultimate outcome. And that's why we use other communication techniques as well, things like direct communications from ourselves through email to our email lists and so forth, because in those medium, while we may not have as large an audience, we do control the message. Does that help?
If you were to receive the email address for a small newspaper, Would that be helpful?
Yes, thank you.
I just, my main point is, like, after our meetings, we issue especially if something newsworthy happens, from our PIO information office, we send out a summary of what happened, and I think that's helpful here.
I can address that now, or I can wait until my agenda item, whatever your preference is.
We'll wait.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so now that we've gone through all the working groups, this is an action item. We did make some verbal modifications, so now I would entertain a motion trying to summarize that.
Do we need to do all of them at once, or can we do we have to do them one at a time?
Yeah, it's up to us.
Up to us.
It's up to the motion maker who wants to be creative.
We can make our own rules?
We are today.
So before the motion, I just want to make a clarification on the Regional Airspace Working Group. It does not currently list Schriever Air Force Base, but presumably we will be included in that. We received a letter, and we received a letter from the FAA recently because of the small piece of restricted airspace that we have, and they're doing a larger study of routes in and out of Denver. And they asked us to weigh in on those impacts, if you will. I referred that to our joint land use study folks in our XP shop to kind of take that for action. I think they brought that up in a recent technical committee meeting, but just want to make sure that we'll add Schriever to that regional airspace study.
Yeah. Certainly, we would rather be more expensive than less, and we had specifically addressed the concerns we are aware of at Cheyenne Mountain with their desire to have restricted airspace in our last technical committee. So, yes, we would be happy to entertain.
Yes, if I could make a suggestion for that same regional airspace working group. Down in Pueblo, they have the IFS program with, I think it's the First Flying Training Squadron, and they use a lot of the same airspace. I don't know if their voice will be expressed through the Air Force Academy's representative, but it certainly shouldn't be made in a vacuum without them participating.
Yeah, they're responsible to the 306 Flying Training Group, which operates out the Air Force Academy. So I'd say yes, but take a note to make sure that we're not just focused solely on the USAFA airspace, but we also provide our expertise to the regional airspace usage, which brings the First Flying Training Squadron into the mix. So,
One more question. Are there any unmanned system operators in the county? Does El Paso County, for example, have any UAS systems, or would they be? Now we're talking about flying unmanned systems that might interfere with the military flight path. Should we include a group like that?
Don't know. We should probably find out.
So we did specifically, that did come up in the technical committee as well, and frankly, that's one of the sort of hobbyist UAS is the primary concern around Cheyenne Mountain. There are clearly military users and restricted airspace that supports those military users in El Paso County and nearby. But if are you looking at more of an industry perspective?
I don't know how to get at general population the recreational hobbyists, but I wonder if there's a civilian like the sheriff's office, for example, that might do. I don't know if other organizations that we could go at, at the FAA.
The FAA will be engaged, and they're really the proponent for that, and they're in the eventual UAS integration in the airspace. So again, we'll rely on them, in my opinion, to kind of feed that. And currently, per civil air, restrictions, if you are a hobbyist UAS pilot, you're below 500 feet, which is considered out of the airspace generally. So certainly it's an issue, and certainly it's something we've considered. But I think the FAA will be able to speak to that as we move forward with this working group.
I was just going to say there are some groups we could use to get word out if, should conclusions come out of that working group. There's some different hobbyist groups and other organizations that would be good outlets, but I don't know that they would be the right people for the committee itself.
For example, who would specify GPS geofencing? Who would set those boundaries where GPS that's equipped for the GPS locator would not be able to cross that geofence? Who would set those boundaries, or is that appropriate for this group? I don't know.
I would say that's a little advanced. It's a great conceptual technology, but I don't know that that's been really integrated into the mass system yet, so I think it's probably beyond our scope here.
Okay.
Okay. Back to a motion.
Entertain a motion? Make a motion that we approve the 6 working groups, the ratification of those working groups with the suggested modifications.
Any discussion on that, or do we need clarification on those modifications? Does everybody understand what we're voting on? Everybody looks so happy today. Come on. Must be the weather or something. Okay. All right, well, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Good, thank you. We'll now move to item 6B, Technical Committee seat addition for Military Affairs Council.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion there, but for those who aren't familiar, the Military Affairs Council of the Business Alliance is a 75-year-old organization that's been supporting the military here in town. They do a number of different working groups with the military bases and undertake a variety of activities in support of those bases. So they have a lot of depth of knowledge and background on these issues. Many of those folks have come out of the military bases themselves, so they have a great deal of experience and knowledge in this area. So I'd like to propose that we add one person, either the MAC chair or designee, to serve on that technical committee. So that's my motion.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Go ahead.
All right. As the chair of the technical committee, I just want to understand or have a discussion in this forum about the role that they would play, and if they are germane, looking at the other members of the committee. So other members of the technical committee are typically like CDOT, DNR, government agencies, or government representatives who bring their expertise and the role of their department or division or section. I don't in any way want to demean the MAC. I appreciate their experience, but I don't see them as being in the same vein in terms of their being sort of a subordinate part of the RB, the Regional Business Alliance. So I'm just curious if there's any thoughts or input about their role. Now, Wes Clark represented the MAC at the last technical committee meeting, and certainly would welcome their presence, but I'm somewhat hesitant about supporting them being voting members of the technical committee.
Go ahead, Turner.
Any discussion?
Is there someone that would fill both roles? That would have the heart and soul of the MAC and also have the technical background?
I believe that person's sitting to my immediate left.
Yeah. But I'm not going to be on the technical. We have so much time. Thank you.
It's your sales
No,
pitch.
their expertise generally, amongst the members, they've come out of different bases in the past, so they're most familiar, individual members are most familiar with the issues around different bases. That's why the MAC chair or in his case, he normally would designate the Defense Mission Task Force chair, which is a committee of the MAC that works with all the installations.
Maybe I can just, the reason I thought it was a great idea is because the members of the MAC have broad general military experience. They would be more a member at large. They live in the civilian community. They have a strong background, a military background. They bring a lot of weight, and they could be a connecting piece. It would kind of help stitch pieces together. So, I don't know if that's a benefit to the committee, but sometimes it's a person who has a higher level of view rather than a specific entity may be helpful to the group. That's just my thought. It's what I was thinking when I seconded.
Certainly, and I guess looking at it as the technical committee, that we are looking for the subject matter experts within that field, whereas this to me is the more broader forum, hence what I brought up. I don't disagree that they certainly have a role. I'm just not sure it's a voting role, and that's my only point.
We do have a motion and a second on the floor.
So we can
proceed
to vote.
Any further discussion? Okay. We've made some compelling arguments for and against. I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So noted. You will not be invited to the MAC Christmas party. All right, item 7, information items. Let's go with item A.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm James McMurray with HB&A, Planning and Architecture. It's good to be here with you today. Angela just asked me to come and stand before the group for just a minute to give you an introduction to who we are and what we're doing in terms of supporting the joint land use study effort. And I've got a hard copy here in case you want a souvenir, but no pressure. I know how papers can add up. So with that, I'll just give you a quick rundown of who we are and what we'll be doing. Like I said, I'm James McMurray, senior planner with HB&A. I come to this to this effort with some experience over the past few years. Prior to joining HB&A over a year ago, I was serving as a contract community planning and liaison support person for the Front Range installations. I originally came in supporting at Air Force Space Command and then was reassigned under Air Force Civil Engineer Center to be able to work more freely across all the installations. So spent a couple of years getting a pretty deep familiarity with a lot of the issues that are being tackled in the joint land use study. And so this feels in some ways like a real continuation of that work. We are partnered, as you can see, with Bachman Public Relations and Tetra Tech. Lisa Bachman's here in the audience. She has worked extensively in the region on all kinds of things, including previously supporting some efforts led by PPACG. She and Monica have really been spearheading a lot of the public engagement and coordination efforts to date in terms of getting word out about the survey and coordinating a lot of the public meetings and things like that. So their support has been tremendous. And then we have on our backbench, Tetra Tech. Both Rudy and Heather are away on project travel this week, but they're part of the team just to enhance the breadth and depth of what we're doing, or in case we need to call in the big guns for larger meetings, things like that. And also Tess Ahern, she's my colleague from HB&A. She's here taking notes for the meeting. She will be providing committee support for both the policy and technical committees throughout the process. So you'll see any number of us at different points along the way, and we're always happy to talk, answer questions, bad ideas around anything of that nature. Just to give you a quick high-level overview of what we'll be doing on the project. As I mentioned, we'll be supporting this committee and the technical committee, helping PPACG staff keep things organized and running. We'll have a role helping to develop some of the different resources that are going to be used in the public engagement efforts. So we've got a database that we've put together to help with some of the coordination that will be ongoing throughout the process, and anticipate there will be some infographics and other kinds of visual materials that will be getting developed to assist with community meetings and things like that. And then, of course, given that this is all centered around the public participation plan, we'll be doing a fair amount of that public engagement support, which we've begun with the Speakers Bureau presentations and getting the email blasts out to notify community stakeholders about the survey. And that role will just continue to move forward and adapt as necessary throughout the process in support of what you are all doing. So we're just glad to be on board, excited to work with you all, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Is the database and future infographics, will that be available for us to access? Because I think both in this forum and then certainly with our different groups that we pay our bills, if you will, that might be very helpful in engaging constituents about the military and the community.
Sure. The database is, I'd call it at the 0.99 level. We're about to the 1.0. So that we're getting that onto the servers here at PPACG, and that'll be freely available to anyone on the project that wants to utilize that resource. The infographics, we're still a little ways out from knowing what the details on that will be, but those are intended to be widely used and disseminated, I think. I don't want to speak for Angela on that, or Brian, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just a real quick question.
Sure.
The size of the database and stakeholders, as far as stakeholders are concerned, the size of the database, what do you expect?
As it currently stands, there's about 350 organizations and or individuals on the database, and I expect that that'll continue to just grow and expand as needed to address what needs to be done on the project.
My question is, would you include soldiers and airmen on the bases as part of your public? How do you reach the individual pilot or tank driver or truck driver who's traveling on public highways? How do you reach him?
That's a good question. As we were talking about the general approach that we wanted to take, and I may let Lisa chime in on this as well. One thing that we were trying to be aware of and sensitive to is making sure that we didn't jump to all the low-hanging fruit in terms of the military networks that were in town.
Yeah.
Disproportionately to the community groups, because we didn't want to create a situation where there could be a perception that we're stacking the deck in terms of that. So we've coordinated with the PIOs on the bases, Melissa and others that have been really helpful. I think with some of that internal coordination going around, Lisa's coordinated with a number of groups that fit that category.
One right answer might be maybe it's the PIO to the local commanders down to the, squad leader.
Right.
But that's not your network. That's that network.
Yeah. So one of the things we did at Shooter Air Force Base, I think Angela sent us an email about the survey, and just as a reminder, the survey's going out there. We took the initiative to get that to our public affairs officer, put it in not only on our website but also on our base paper to let the airmen know on the installation, hey, this is going on, and we'll continue that public information campaign, if you will, ideally tied in with what HBA is doing as we move forward. So.
I also want to offer, in addition to when we met with Schriever, I think, Commissioner Steen, your question also addresses or is asking, what about the particular issues that are very specific to the installations? And obviously, we've looked at that too, and how to handle that, whether it's a separate survey or individual questionnaire, those type of things. And I will tell you, when we met with Colonel Slade and your team, that they had done an internal survey of all the employees on the installation in regards to traffic and some things like specific issues like that. They have since shared that with us, and so we will be able, again, to take advantage of that, not duplicating any work, but again, having the knowledge that has been done by other organizations too.
Good. Okay, thank you very much.
Did Lisa want to come up, or?
Would you like me to
Come on up. Come on up. Come on down. Why not?
Happy to.
Thank you. Lisa Bachman, Bachman PR. So I've been working as part of James's team on the outreach and stakeholder database development. So as James said, we have over 300 emails that have gone out to various organizations, and the PIOs have been great. Pretty much all of them. There's just a couple that haven't responded. So we've gotten the emails out, and our next wave will be the follow-up phone calls. But military organizations, retired military organizations, I've reached out to MOA, Brian Bin with the Air Force Association SIGEN chapter has been great. He said, we're going to get it out. I could read off the whole list, but we, as James said, we are like 99% there with it. We've got to clean it up because we're getting a couple bounce backs, and we want to make some follow-up calls just to make sure it's not going into people's spam folders. I don't know why anyone would think that would be spam, but we want to just follow up and clean it up. So we're doing that. The other thing with the airmen and the soldiers, in addition to the PIOs, is we're really going to put a hard push on the homeowners associations, because there are a lot of organizations that have a newsletter, and a lot of our airmen and soldiers live off base and post. So that will get to them a different way. So not just through the military channels, but where they live, where they work, where they shop, that kind of thing.
Great. Lisa, were you just working with the base PIOs, or do you know, for example, like Peterson Air Force Base, where they've got a lot of different tenant units on base? Did you work with those unit PIOs, or do you know if the base PIO was communicating that to the other?
I worked with the unit PIOs as well. So, for example, Army, I work with D, McNaught, the garrison, but then also the 4th Infantry. So Jeff Bond has been great. He provided me the list of all the PIOs from all the units, and even including the National Guard and the veterans. And they were great. They responded right away. Colonel Dorian has been great. So all of the different units. What I've not done is elevated it above the PIOs. I wanted to start there. And then if I don't hear, there's like 3 I haven't heard from, then I'll follow up, make a follow-up call.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And so if you all haven't taken the survey, you all constitute civilian or members of the community as well. So you can take it as many times as you feel right doing so.
Wow. And if you don't, she may be sending you an email.
Yeah, that's right. Any other things on item A before we move to B? Okay, we will now move to the public participation and outreach plan. I think that's Rachel. Yes. Come on down.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, you're good.
So you may recall at your last meeting you approved the public participation and outreach plan, and that identified 3 phases that we're planning for executing that particular part of the study. And so we're getting toward the end of the first phase, which we called information gathering. Oh, thanks. Brian knows I can't multitask. We've got about 2 million people in the study area, and so we wanted to start out by casting a wide net. And in your packet, we included an update to date on the tactics that we had identified in the plan for reaching out to those people initially. And so I'll give you a few updated numbers. You've heard some of them already. We started out with the telephone town halls, 1 in each county. Angela and Brian gave quick overviews of different components of the study and really pushed hard for people to take the survey. We'd invited a county commissioner from each county to join us, but we joked that we had the curse of the JLUS telephone town hall, because I think every single one got sick or had something come up before the night of the telephone town hall. So we got some good participation in those town halls, and Angela's going to give you a more detailed breakout of those in the next item. We had hoped that that would really drive building an email list and getting survey participation, and as it turned out, that I don't, judging by our numbers, unless people waited a long time before they took that survey, we did not realize that goal. But nevertheless, we did reach thousands of people throughout the survey area, including a lot of people in the rural areas that are a little harder to reach using the traditional come to a public meeting in a central location method. So we still count those as a success. You've heard an update on the survey, 591 responses. And that was largely driven by the Speakers Bureau, and you've heard a lot about that already. We'd said we wanted to come up with a comprehensive list of community contacts, and Lisa has just done an incredible job in a short amount of time reaching out to all sorts of groups. So that has made a huge difference in the number of surveys that we've seen taken. And in addition to making a pitch for taking surveys as individuals, she really did a great job of making sure that organizations like Kono and the Business Alliance and the Downtown Partnership were putting that in their newsletters, and so that really had a multiplier effect in terms of getting the word out. And then in addition to the 350 organizations in the Bachman HB&A database, PPACG sent 2 emails out to about 1,000 contacts that we have, and we got a very good response rate from those. Our open rates and our click rates, which are what you use to judge the effectiveness of those kinds of things, were much higher than industry averages. And we saw a small bump in the number of people that signed up for our email list after the first one, which is always good. So we think that means that people were forwarding that, and whoever they forwarded to were signing up for more updates. And then we also have social media that we're targeting toward some populations that we identified in the survey as a little underrepresented. We've seen really great participation from some of the northern neighborhoods of Colorado Springs. We're not seeing as high of numbers as we'd like from Pueblo County and Fountain. So we're really trying to increase the number of responses from those groups. And then we sent a news release out early in April, and we received coverage from the Gazette just recently. And that link was not included in your packet. Oops, wrong one. Because that had not happened at the time that we printed your packets. But we got some great coverage from Tom Roeder, and we saw a little jump in our surveys after this was published. And we also got some coverage in the Cheyenne Edition, which is a weekly neighborhood paper. It doesn't have a huge circulation, but it does have a very loyal following in its neighborhoods. And then you've seen our fact sheets. We've made some flyers that say, take our survey, and distributed those in various places as well. Questions or comments on any of that before I move on to our next steps?
What do you attribute your success to? For example, email updates, triple, that you oversee. What do you do so well?
Well, I'd like to think there's a lot of interest in the study because the subject matter is always important. But I really think that the Speakers Bureau has been very effective. When you've got a live person standing in front of your group and telling you it is important for you, Commissioner Steen, to take that survey, that makes a big difference. Or if you're a member of a group that sends you something in their newsletter and says, we, the organization that you're a member of, thinks that this is important, that makes a big difference.
Good.
So next steps. We have a number of immediate tactics on the list that we need to take care of. Once we close the survey, we will release those survey results. This is a public agency, and so that is public information. But it's also just a good practice when you ask for the public's input to let them see the results. This will also be an opportunity for us to get some additional media coverage. So we hope that that'll generate some additional coverage there. We will send an email update to those same contacts and update our website with some information on the working groups that have been appointed. We've promised people that we would share that information as we decided which working groups were going to be formed, and we'll send a news release out on that as well, to your point, Commissioner Glenn.
Great.
And then we'll move on to the next phase in our communication plan, which we kind of dubbed themes. Again, starting with a wide net and kind of narrowing down as we get information. So once we compile all these survey results and get the final answers and close that, we'll see what themes, what issues are emerging, how we need to communicate in support of the working groups, and fine-tune those audiences and come up with strategies and tactics to reach those more specific audiences that we'll identify.
The only thing I would like to add is just for each member here, just some quick talking points, because we all sit on various groups or boards, and it would be nice to be able to give a concise summary of what's going on here.
You know, we actually have those, so I apologize for not sharing those. We will get those out.
Any other discussion on this topic? All right, great job. We'll move to item C, telephone town hall results.
All right. I won't go over the telephone town halls, as Rachel has already done that. But again, Tom Miller in our office is definitely our data guy, and he split this apart about 17 or 27 different ways for you. So we thought it was good to include it because it is a first time for the team on the joint land use study to put these numbers together. I think one of the most positive things that may have come out of this, although the numbers were small, and I think a typical kind of robocall like this would usually generate about 3%. So the numbers that we fell below 3% at about 1.5% kind of responses from those calls. But I don't think the response rate for these type of calls is typically that high. But kind of putting a positive spin on that, I do think the comments that we received during the telephone town halls and the people who did sign up and take the survey afterwards were a demographic that we probably would not reach. We're probably not reaching right now through those emails, and we're probably wouldn't reach them if we had community meetings. So again, I think it was a chance for us to kind of pull from a demographic that we may not have reached in other ways. But again, is the value of the information that we were able to obtain from them via, number one, we wanted them to take the survey. And so what we would do is we would check about 24 to 48 hours after each survey to see who filled it out from those counties. We didn't necessarily get a lot of results from that. So we wanted to present the facts, show it to you. Again, I think it's something that, based on your direction and the Public Communications Working Group, that they should really look at this data and then decide if we use it as a tool in the future or not.
One thing to add to that was interesting, after the telephone town halls, we did have people calling us and in some cases saying, I'm not online, but I received a phone call. Would you be able to send me a written survey, or where can I get one? And so we had those available, so we were able to get feedback from those people that missed the call and weren't internet connected. So that was an outgrowth of that.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions?
Did anyone receive one of the calls?
No. I never answer the phone, so.
Yeah. I'm surprised at how many phone calls you connected with in Teller County.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 3 people per home. That's 23,000 total population. There's only about 8,000 households in all of Teller County. You've got 6,000 of those, and my guess is some of them don't even have phones because they got cell phones.
Yeah.
So my guess, you probably got 80% plus of every landline in the county. Might be my guess. No, well, yeah, I was in that sick group, but it's amazing.
And one thing that's hard to say or to even kind of pull from this data is that you're absolutely right in that respect. And if they didn't answer and they didn't just hang up on us, we were able to leave a message and tell them about the study. It was a quick, short one, but tell them about the study and then to take the survey. So we still made contact with them if they did not answer.
Good. Okay. Item D, project schedule timeline snapshot.
So we are currently on schedule with the majority of items. The one item that we need to do that we're falling a little bit behind on is meeting with the Cheyenne Canyon or Cheyenne Mountain, Cheyenne Mountain, and getting together with that group. So we do need to kind of, any help that you can, maybe reaching out to them would be great, so we don't get too far behind schedule. And really, we're just looking for that kind of initial meeting to obtain data from them and have them go through that issue challenges with us to make sure that we've covered everything, because we don't want to assume anything. So that would be helpful. The other items that we are really trying to pick up the pace on are the Air Force Academy Flight Training Working Group, so that we can really get that in the time frame that we need to this summer. The other items seem to be really at pace with the schedule that we had set up. And any questions about that?
You leaving is not on the schedule, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can go.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Item E, installation reports. How do we want to start?
It's always which end do you start on.
There you go.
Again, Colonel Ken Olson from the Air Force Academy. Glad to be here. Really, we do support the JLUS. We want to make sure that we're good partners in making sure how the military impacts the community and how the community impacts the military, and make sure we come up with some good strategies as we move forward. Just from a just to give some summaries of our engagements, the most significant engagements have been with the County Planning Commission and our County Planning Department and some developers for our northern boundary and what we're doing up there, and just making sure we're understanding, we're opening the dialogue between us and them. And then we had a meeting with the city planners and a couple developers on the east side of I-25 within the last couple months right now. Time's flying by. I've been here a year already. Can't believe it. So those engagements are really good. We don't have anything specific or significant planned on the horizon, but our planners down in our civil engineer squadron have been engaging with the county and city on some projects that are coming up and making sure we're in the know. We're on the email list. We're on the distro list for planning documents and things like that, so we get our review and get our opinions in on those documents and those developments. So I think we're moving along in the right direction. Our encroachment management team, which I'm the executive director, is really engaged. Great to see the JLUS team come out and sit in our meetings out there so they can hear what we're talking about, and we can kind of get updates here at the installation level. So we appreciate that support. And any of your questions, that's all I have. Thank you.
Question here, Turner.
Sir.
Colonel, have you started, I know you have a lot of projects up there on stormwater. Have you got any of those projects underway, or is that just a continual battle up there for you guys?
So we don't have any significant projects currently planned in the current FY or next FY because we don't want to throw good money after bad.
Yes.
So really we need to solve the upstream problems with the developments that are coming in around what I call the Interquest corridor. You know, as Interquest moves down, not Interquest, Voyager, basically starting at Interquest and Voyager and then moving north up Voyager. So we had going back to the meeting that we had with the city and the I'm going to get the name of the study wrong because the Fountain Creek Watershed study. We're integral partners in that, contribute to that. So we've got skin in the game in that study, and we are going to try and look to those projects, and this is in coordination with the city, but those projects as the agreement has been established between Pueblo and Colorado Springs, and as that starts to take fruition, there are projects in the top of the watershed. If you didn't know it, 75% of that watershed flows through the academy. It doesn't originate on the academy, but it flows through the academy. So we have a significant interest in how we deal with the sediment development and the erosion issues and all those things that happen from the developments to the north and east of us. So I don't have any projects on the books right now, but we have projects ready to go, but we got to figure out, are we going to spend money on them than to just spend money on them 5 years from now? So right now we're not planning on doing a significant work there, but we're doing the things that are keeping us legal with the Department of Natural Resources. So, we're maintaining our habitats and maintaining our streams to the best ability we can right now. Kind of a long answer to a short question, but.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
Rod Chisholm again from Fort Carson. I think we'd already mentioned the rail in an earlier comment, but our rail deployment and, of course, the strategic road network going from Fort Carson proper to Pinyon Canyon or to a deploying port, which most of those are out of Corpus Christi area in Texas. We're always looking to protect those avenues because that's strategic for our deployment, which is the majority. And, of course, we have an air departure control group for aircraft platform deployments. A lot of our special forces will go out working very closely with Peterson. And so those are always areas that we're looking at. And so whatever's affecting Peterson is affecting kind of our deployment capability, particularly with our special forces group. But other things, we have worked over the past 2 years. We had some high rains, as you all know, 2 years ago. We actually had a lot of stormwater that came off of Cheyenne Mountain onto Fort Carson across 115 or under 115 for the most part. But it created such a flow that we had to increase our infrastructure capacity to handle the stormwater to ensure that we could control it properly and keep the infiltration out of our actual treated water that we have. And we've done that. We've done that and expanded our water treatment plant. We've also done a lot to ensure that our effluent that goes out of our water treatment plant, which will flow off of Fort Carson around the vicinity of Gate 20, which is along the Fountain and the I-25 interstate area. It's a little bit south of that where we flow off the installation, but we're always concerned about making sure that any effluent that goes off of Fort Carson is meeting all the standards or exceeding all the standards, so that other people who have water rights will be able to take that water and treat it or irrigate whatever they do with it downstream. And to that end, we've expanded our reclaimed water out of our wastewater treatment plant, bringing that back onto the main area at Fort Carson. And so we're watering our golf course, we're watering all our bar fields, we're watering all those park-type areas with reclaimed water, and that's a sustainable issue, which we've been very big with. Doesn't get off of Fort Carson proper, but it's something we've invested a lot of effort. We have been working with Colorado Springs Utilities for more renewable energy options to meet some goals that we have with the Department of the Army or Department of Defense, and so some of that does get into availability of natural gas as well as mostly the electricity that we get and how we get it through renewable sources. So that is something that has come up in some other forms, and I don't think that's bled into any of the JLUS yet. But whatever plants or whatever generates renewable forces, if it's wind, which has been considered, then that will fit in if we were putting more towers or because we had needs at an Army installation or an Air Force installation to increase renewable energy. Those are sort of the main things we're doing. I noticed in agenda item 6A, looking for more input from Fort Carson and on our flight tracking, and I want to do that because we do have a lot of helicopter movement that goes from just our main area on the north part of Fort Carson to the training ranges on the southern part of our training area. Sometimes they fly down corridors that create noise. So noise is an issue that we're always concerned with our helicopters. And then if they are flying down to Pinyon Canyon for exercises down there, then we work with landowners and flight corridors to be sure we're very careful about minimizing the impact to the local community. As well as during the summer, a lot of times we get units that come in and fire a lot of artillery during their annual training, whether it be National Guard or the Reserve. And we're always very cognizant of the weather conditions, so we may curtail some of that training if the weather conditions are such that the noise contours would just vibrate along the line because of cloud ceilings or inversions or whatever and create a lot of noise to our local communities. Even going down into Pueblo West and something like that, you can hear the sound of freedom often from Fort Carson during the summer. So the other thing I would mention is on the southern working group that came up, it was pretty much along the lines of stormwater that we talked about here on the core values. Once we get the flight tracking and some of that information, it may be that we would want to expand some of that southern working group that we talked about core values to include some of the air. I did forget one thing. We do have some impoundments on Fort Carson, a Teller Dam in particular, that we've been studying to ensure, rather than breaching that and having more storm water that would flow with whatever natural event occurred, which could affect property to immediate to our south, which is a large landowner, but then flowing into particularly Pueblo West and some other areas. We're looking at repairing that dam and even raising that to allow more protection so that we're protecting those floodplains that are on the southern part of the installation. Apart from that, that's all I have.
Okay. Nothing to add from Schriever Air Force Base. We're good this time.
Thought I'd have more time to prep. So I'll say, Peterson, and also representing Cheyenne Mountain, we're excited about what this study means. I am intrigued by how Peterson kind of overlays with the airspace working group as well as the transportation, I'll call it ground transportation working group. There's a lot of concern that we have with construction that's going on around our installation, talking Peterson specifically, and what that means to ground traffic trying to gain access to Peterson. We're doing a lot of work, obviously community helping us out a great deal with Mark Shuffle as well as the powers widening. But there's a lot of interest in land right to our west. And our west gate often gets congested, and so there's some concerns there of what does that additional ground traffic look like as the construction and the build-out continues in that piece of land. Additionally, that piece of land also lays right on the extended end of the west runway. So we're interested in making sure that we continue to stay engaged on behalf of a tenant of ours, the 302nd Air National Guard, and their C-130s. We have a great training location being high altitude with the mountains, so we can do some unique training opportunities there. But that also causes some issues when the summer months come, the temperature goes up and the aircraft performance goes down. And so any building on those extended end of those runways causes us some concern, as I represent 302nd as well. So what we'd like to do is make sure we stay engaged in any of those discussions for the future. Now, there's obviously one that I think the worst kept secret in Colorado Springs that is currently in the work. That's a tactical example of a more strategic problem. Strategic problem also exists down at the ADAG. Mr. Chisholm brought up our partnership with Fort Carson and air mobility getting out of Colorado Springs Airport. So don't know how familiar you are with that, but down on the south end of the runway, large ramp space that is owned by Fort Carson, but we, Peterson 21st Space, we jointly operate that. And as construction continues, if we're concerned about getting people and equipment to and from Fort Carson to Peterson, we got to consider that as well. It's not just to Peterson proper; it is to the ADAG out there on the south end. And the roads right now are great, 4-lane roads in and out of that place. But again, as folks become more and more interested in the land south of the base, those roads will become overutilized very quickly. So we want to make sure that we continue to keep that in the cross-check as well as we support the 10th and the 4th ID. The other thing is from Cheyenne Mountain, we are about done with our construction and recovering from the landslide. I believe that's what you were talking about with the water and much debris that came off the mountain. So we're working very hard to make sure that should we have any of the rock break free again, that is contained and doesn't do the damage that it did downstream that it did a couple years back. That construction is almost done. In fact, this morning we had the 50th anniversary run through Cheyenne Mountain, which was great, and was able to observe that construction for myself personally, and they're making great strides there. So we likewise are interested in any of the water that's coming off our installations and making sure that that is meeting standards before we release that out into the community. So barring any questions, that's kind of my update today.
Good.
Sir. Recently, I think last summer, we did the high altitude mountain environment training. There was some public engagement. I don't know, there was some question about establishing lists of LZs and so on, primarily northern Fremont and southern Teller County. Any updates of where that study is and conclusions from it?
I don't have any update, but most of the high altitude training that we do is kind of our trainers come out of our combat aviation brigade, and we get a lot of aviation units from across the Army that will come out here for that high altitude training. So the only thing I was aware of was trying to do a different upgrade of some of our, a generator to power some of the flight implementation stuff that we have out there, so that our air traffic control tower is more, has better situational awareness of the patterns because of the mountainous training. And we do have an awful lot of small leases that actually go through the Corps of Engineers for different landowners where we go up there and we'll concentrate some of our training over their land area by a lease of the airspace above them. But I'm not aware of apart from those two things, Mr.
But
Chairman.
it was studied, it's all is on public lands, primarily BLM lands, defining for exercise purposes specific landing sites, LZs and approaches, low altitude approaches on rotary. And there was a pretty robust public response to, this is where the elk herd always settled down for the night, and when the aircraft comes in early morning, the elk scatter, and the calving season's up. I don't know. So I don't know. I wasn't part of that conversation, but I know it was underway, I think, last summer, and very responsive. Yeah, Lee?
Sure. Okay, I can answer up on that a little bit. We're kind of through the evaluation process. We had the public comment process. We went, the BLM folks who are running the study went back, the people at Carson, gave them the max use landing strips and the max use that they could think of per year, I think was the and they broke it down by month and day. And that generated what you said was a lot of response, and not positive response. But then to Carson's credit, they went back and said, okay, we take this input, we're going to reduce the number of LZs, and I think it was 20 or 30%. I can't get my number on it. At different locations to adjust and and maybe even reduce. And I think that's still in the process right now, from what I understand. Yeah, but it could be backed up. I bet folks at Carson D can get you some information on that.
I don't know if any of the findings of that study would be incorporated into here. I don't know if you're part of that conversation. I don't know.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, with the BLM, they have a rep that is on the technical committee, and I have occasionally called them up to find out status. I know that they're kind of doing a bit of a speakers bureau or open house in and of itself, where they're going to various communities throughout the region related to land use, not just Hammett. But there's a general land use plan that they're working on, and maybe that's what you're referencing, or was that specific to Hammett, Lee?
Land use, if you talk about within the BLM.
Okay, yes.
Landing zone.
Yes.
The rest of it is a true low-flying noise issue, other than the landing zones themselves.
Okay, yes, and so there's another effort the BLM is also working on related to that. It's a component of just looking overall at land use related to BLM lands in the state of Colorado. And so they're in a comment period, review period, and so my understanding is that period, I'll have to check with the BLM to see when that comment period ends, but I understand that after that they feel that they're going to be able to come back and be more engaged with some more set policies on how they're utilizing their land and be able to work more with the landing zones and so on. So that should be coming up hopefully this summer.
So is that part of this?
It's going to tie into this, and when I did meet with the BLM a few months ago, I said that that would be one of the goals, is that this land use study is actually, again, it's a great opportunity to take some of the things they're working on and use this study as a way to link it up with some of the more specific military issues that are going to be covered within the joint land use study.
Yes, sir.
I'll just note, too, with the Hammett discussions before, it was brought up that, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, it's not oftentimes the Fort Carson aircraft that are, I don't want to call it the problem, but that are using the landing sites. It's often aircraft from other Army installations. So if it's going to be included in this, I think it's relevant that that distinction be made, because a lot of times it's not going to be the Fort Carson impact, it's the larger Army impact.
Okay. Anything else?
Just one comment. If you've ever heard the commanding general, or the current commanding general or previous commanding generals talk about what makes Fort Carson unique compared to any other installation, apart from the great community that we're in, which is special, is the fact that we have Pinyon Canyon, which is a little bit shy of 250,000 acres, that we can train and do a large-scale land operation with the 4th Infantry Division, and the high-altitude training. It makes our installation unique. So when we're looking at what Fort Carson brings to the total Army, those are two aspects that a lot of other installations do not have the capability to provide. So if it's within the realm of what we're doing with the JLUS, we'd certainly want to be addressing it in a way to protect that, not only for Fort Carson's benefit, but it's a Department of Defense asset that we don't have at a lot of other installations.
Okay, let's move to item F, community reports. Do we have any community reports? Nope. You blink, you're done. I know. Yes. No. You can stay after class if you want. Okay, well, our next meeting is going to be on August 25th. So I really appreciate everybody, their support with this whole effort. I think it's going to be a great, fascinating thing for the community. And we are adjourned. That's it. We're getting out of here. I got to go to Lakewood.
I don't think I better tell Colonel Tormey I wasn't trying to call him out, but.
All right. Well, I'll be here for that August 25th.
I know. Appreciate it. I'm going to give this to her so she can recycle.
Perfect. Sounds good. And there'll be a lot more exciting stuff up here.